My name's Joe Sneevy, Cedric's friend. Met him when I was a kid. Nancy asked me to put together some thoughts on behalf of the friends group, because we're all very close. Felt very honored to do that. So I'm going to try to get through this and honor our friends here. So it doesn't really, it goes without saying, Cedric's passing is absolutely devastating. We have unfillable voids in our hearts. That'll never change. And not only is it like a hole in our hearts, it feels like there's a hole in the world now that he is not here, but that we are here. We have to sort of put aside that sorrow and try to focus on all the good things we can remember about Cedric and how he was such a wonderful person. But before I go on, I just want to say, we know as friends of Cedric that our pain and what we feel right now pales in comparison, I'm sure, to what you guys are feeling. And on behalf of all of us from the group, thanks for sharing Cedric with us. It's like, just cherish him, and there's no way life would be the same without him. So before I go on, I just want to say, thought about all of Cedric's closest friends as I put this together, and that's want to acknowledge them. Charlie Poppin, Chris Hegarty, Chris Kudra, Deanna Dumdye, Derek Lindberg, Jason Chris, Jeff Ruland, Janelle Ray, Jenny Lindberg, Jeremy Lindberg, Carrie Fegan, Mike Martinez, Robbie Bars, Zach Langner, and Zach Clyde. And most of us contributed to putting this together. The last 3 weeks we've been sharing memories and trying to honor his legacy. So, but that's not really surprising, because our group's always been very close, and we all grew up together, became adults together, and Cedric shaped each one of us in his own unique way. None of us would be who we are today without him. And part of the reason why it's so hard, it's the first time in our lives we've had to say goodbye to one of the group, and in a way we're sort of dealing with the death of our own childhood. And that's long been the case, but it's forcing us to confront that, and it's very confusing, and I'm not ready to get old. But anyway, Cedric moved to Del Rapids in first grade. He was the new kid, even though we were only in school for a year before that. And he was like sweet, and he was shy, and he was super nice and kind. And I grew up I lived on a farm, and a lot of the city kids didn't really like me, or didn't feel like it. But Cedric did, and he was my first friend. And I got to go to his house after school and get a taste of what the city life was, and hang out with Frank and Sean too, and learn bad things. And, it was pretty fun. And but he made friends pretty quick. Everybody loved him. Time was put on him. They got a trampoline, so then it became like, hey, let's go to Cedric's house. We all loved jumping on it. Nancy made us sign waivers. The jumping was fun, but it was more like the way you would interact with him and each other as we jumped, and sort of took breaks. And it wasn't about the jumping, it was about the relationships. We know that now, we didn't then. He was very deep and layered. There was a lot going on with Cedric. He was clean, and they went inside, and Carrie noticed that Cedric had a Bible. He was like 8 or 9 years old, and it was pretty worn. And he had read it, and he was very spiritual in that way, even though he didn't wear it on his sleeve. And the two, had a lasting relationship. He was funny and smart and talented. We didn't know it then, but we were into decades of fun, and Cedric was also really good at singing and dancing. And, he won a talent show when he was a kid, impersonating Michael Jackson. I thought that was pretty cool. He could moonwalk. Shortly after that, Michael Jackson was no longer in vogue, allegedly, like something happened. But Cedric was always in vogue for us. He kept performing. He played guitar, and he serenaded us many nights, all throughout our lives until we started having families and stuff. Out at the farm, there's an old out-of-service bridge, and we all hung out there a lot. Had fires, and Cedric would always entertain us, and we just sit there, spend time together. That bridge has a lot of stories. So, sorry, it's kind of long. So people don't realize this either, but Cedric could really throw football. He was athletic. The Lindberghs, when they moved to Del Rapids in 1993, they brought with them South Dakota Junior football. Like, they were from Brandon, and that Brandon had that program, and Del's didn't. And so that was the first year Del Rapids had a Pee Wee football team. Cedric was going to be our quarterback, and he could throw the best. And we thought we were going to go all the way to the Dome and win the title. And all those teams got to play the last game of the Dome. But we figured we could do well with Cedric, but then he broke his arm. And throughout his life, he'd get the short end of the stick a lot. And he was on a rope swing. I think Jason was there. I think it was in Ryan Hansen's backyard. And he fell off the rope swing, a compound fracture in his arm. And there went our hopes of winning the title. Zach Live was the backup quarterback. He thought he could do the same job as Cedric, but we didn't win the title. Thank you for your effort, Zach, but didn't quite work out. Speaking of short end of the stick, Cedric was a musician, and he started as a band, as a trumpet player, but he had to switch to percussion because he got hit in the face. The way I remember, he got hit in the face with a basketball, and his face stopped working for a little bit. So he couldn't blow the trumpet anymore. So he had to play percussion, and I was a percussionist, so I was excited about that. I'm sorry that happened to me, Cedric, but now I get to spend more time with him. So, that we got to spend more time together. And one day, this is a funny story I always remember. We were middle school kids, so we didn't really take it seriously. And what we liked to do during band practice was annoy the band instructor. And there's a stereotypical Asian melody, like that tune. On xylophones, I play it over and over. And the band director warned me like 5 or 6 times not to do it. In the worst moments, I would do it. So he kicked me out of class. And I went to the study hall where you'd sit. And about 10 minutes later, Cedric walked in the doors to the study hall. So what are you doing? And he had done it too. In that moment of solidarity. And didn't stop Cedric either. Zach Langer came walking through that door 5 minutes later too. So we were all sort of these percussionist banditos, trying to. I'll always remember it. It meant a lot to me in my sort of immature middle school age, quite a bit. So, but Cedric never conflated himself. He had no ego. He didn't consider himself important. He was very important to us. He wasn't prideful in any way, but we were very proud of him, and we still are. As far as that band thing, I feel like I was able to pay him back about a decade later. We were on a camping trip, the whole group. My parents were there. And I'll just say it rained the entire time on this camping trip. It's in Wisconsin. My folks were not thrilled. They hadn't gone on a trip like this with us before. We were very sophomore humor still, even though we were in our 20s, and the weather was miserable. So anyway, here Cedric comes into this because he needed something to eat, and he grabbed a pack of hot dogs out of the cooler, and he opened the hot dog, made one, threw the packet back in the cooler. It didn't seal it up. Later, my dad needed some ice or something, and we went and got some ice out, I put it in the cup, and then next thing you know, whatever he was drinking or whatever tastes like hot dogs. Why does this taste like hot dogs? And I knew it was Cedric, but I didn't tell. And I felt like I got, paid him back a little bit there. So that's a funny story I remember. So, like I said, he didn't have an ego, in a way that the human condition, he didn't, we all lust for money and flesh and things like that. He didn't seem to have that in him. In high school, he drove a Plymouth Reliant, I think it was two-door, and it didn't have heat, and he was so proud of it. So I just got on wheels, I got him play for point A to point B. He was a pretty thrifty guy. It suited him well because he was perfectly happy just sitting at home, with his family and friends. He didn't need to go out and find lights to stimulate him or anything like that. He liked watching his documentaries and playing video games. But you could entice him to go out with you if you could find some value out there, like a good happy hour or something. He had to get a bang for his buck. He wasn't picky, but he was particular. When it came to beverages or whatever, he needed them ice cold. To the point where he would drink half of a can of pop or a beer or whatever, and then he wouldn't want the rest of it because it wasn't ice cold. So he didn't waste it either. He'd always find somebody to take it. So that story, that's kind of the weird stuff we remember about Cedric, but he would do that. He wanted it ice cold so bad he'd put it in the freezer, but then he'd also often forget about what was in the freezer. And occasionally you'd find an exploded can in your freezer the next morning. He loved us, we loved him. We know that those exploded cans weighed on him because he didn't like inconveniencing anybody. He never wanted to be a bother. One weekend after a reunion when some friends came back, we were hanging out at Jeremy and Jenny's. It went late, so he slept there. When he woke up in the morning, he let himself out and called a cab. He locked the door behind him, and the cab didn't show up for 3 hours. And he didn't want to go back in and wake everybody up. So he laid in the front yard for 3 hours in the heat, and finally the cab showed up. But that's just the kind of guy he was. He didn't want to bother anybody, but he was never a bother. Wish he could bother us, He was a fun guy to hang out with. That goes without saying. There's just wall-to-wall laughter all the time with him. And that camping trip that we were on yielded another funny story, also Carrie and Janelle. It was time to go home after 4 or 5 days of rain. There's 24 of us on the trip. We camped at this lake. You had to have a ticket to the concert we were going to stay there. There were Canadians who were playing the same 3 Pearl Jam songs all night long. The first night it was cool. Second night it was alright. By the end, people were yelling at them to stop. Some guy had a pet skunk. I know Cedric was infatuated with this guy's pet skunk the whole time. Just the fact that the guy had a pet skunk. But and there were some unusual folks there. But anyway, Cedric was very genuine, no ego, like I said, didn't lust for money. He was having a moment after the show one night, and he was telling us about how money doesn't matter, and it's not important in life, things like that. And I'm a contrarian, so yeah, See us live without it, right? And then to prove a point, he burned it. $17. But he proved the point. So I know but he was also thrifty, so I'm sure he did regret it in the morning. We bought him double cheeseburgers on that. So, but on that trip home, he was riding with Carrie, and Janelle, and Josh, Carrie's husband, I think, right? Josh was there. And they got lost. This was before Google Maps. Ended up in some small little town in Wisconsin. And as they were traversing through this town, the roadsides started filling up with old people in lawn chairs and things like that. And before you know it, it became evident that they were like in a parade. In the parade. And Carrie's freaking out, panicking, what do I do, what do I do? And Cedric, you know, he just said, just wave. So that's what they did, they waved. So that was very Cedric-esque, right? And we're never gonna forget the guy. I don't have a grandiose ending or anything like that, but we'll say he was my first friend that wasn't my sister. First person to ever have a sleepover with. He meant so much to me. Their words cannot describe how much he meant to me, and I know how much you guys meant to him, all of you. And we love you, and thank you for letting us have Cedric in our lives for a bit of a time. Thank you.